Views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olsen.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition of After Hours AM. Hey, it's Wednesday, so that means one thing around these parts. It's True Crime Wednesday. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
better known as the Three Amigos of True Crime. But we are here tonight because we are going to be talking about the Lindbergh baby. And, of course, that's something that we touched on, and we will have... Now, I might slaughter his last name, but you know how I am with names. Greg Ahlgren on the show with us. And
I think you got it exactly right.
I think I did, too. And he wrote the book, Crime of the Century, the Lindbergh Kidnapping Hoax. Now, there could be a hoax in there. So we will see. Now, there has been some, whispers here and there that Lindbergh himself may have had something to do with it. But we will talk with him, of course, that's top of next hour, and we will get his thinking and his take on the whole thing, the crime of the century, whether indeed, in his opinion, Charles Lindbergh had anything to do with the disappearance of his son. So that will be next hour, top of next hour, right after the Fox News. You're not going to want to miss that. And, of course, you can catch up with us, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, everywhere else. You can also go to thecriminalcode.com if you want to read some in-depth analysis on all things true crime. And if you are listening right now, chances are you're listening at americasmosthaunted.com. So you're there. You're already here.
If you're not, you should be.
And if you're not, you should be. But you could be at one of our many, many, many other affiliates. And we do want to thank you for carrying After Hours AM and making us part of your daily lives out there. They bring us into their homes. They listen to us. But anyhow, yeah, I have been doing, well, tomorrow night's be a big show for me because I did, for the very, very first time, guys, I went on a squatching hunt, Bigfoot expedition. And it's something that's been a little bit on the bucket list forever. And my good friends over there at the Minnesota Bigfoot research team, they graciously brought me with them. So Mr. Abe Del Rio, big hats off to him. He's the founder, and he's the one that runs that group. And it was different, guys. I mean, like I said, we'll be talking about tomorrow night where we actually do the official talk on what we saw and heard and all things Bigfoot and squatchiness tomorrow night. But, man, it kind of shook my belief a little bit. Maybe there is more to this than meets the eye. I don't know. But then again, the woods at night, and we're not used to being in the woods at night, can play tricks on your senses.
You know what else happened in the woods at night?
What?
The Lindbergh baby.
Ah, yes. Getting back to that. The Lindbergh baby happened in
Yes,
the
this is
back
true
seat
crime
of-
night, guys.
It is.
Clever.
It is. But again, that'll be tomorrow night, and we will be talking all things squatchiness that first hour. And then second hour tomorrow night, who do we got on tap there, Eric? Put you in the spot. Look at that. I do that to you every time.
It's all right. Diane Brandon, who has written a book called Born Aware, Stories and Insights from Those Spiritually Aware Since Birth.
Really? That'll be cool. You're not going to want to miss any of that. Again, that's tomorrow night. Same time, same channel. Don't miss it. Now let's get back to what you came for, and that's true crime. Guys, did you guys happen to catch the news? I'm going to pull it up here as fast as I can about the shooting in Minneapolis where he was acquitted, the police officer, Geronimo, and I forget his last, Castile.
I did catch that. Yes.
Got away with shooting, point-blank range. It was all over Facebook, of course, shooting Fernando. I forget his last name. But I will look it up here in a second. But he got off. I was shocked, and the reason why I bring that up now is because I just saw a ticker that, they really believe that he did nothing wrong. To me now, and everyone knows what case I'm talking about, it was all over Facebook. And everybody saw it. Some of us saw it live. It was all over the place. I would have begged to differ with that jury. I thought there was quite a bit that he did wrong.
Nobody out here disagrees with what you're saying, Joel. I know that they're outraged at the jury, but they said that being that, and take this as you will, people from California are saying that since it happened in Minnesota, they're not exactly surprised by the jury's findings.
Yeah.
So,
well, explain what you mean by that, I guess.
They thought that the Minnesota jury would be more sympathetic to the cops.
Generally, by and large, they're right.
Yeah, it's just because of a more conservative mindset, I think, is what people think of Minnesota. Not that they actually know.
Yeah, well, Minnesota's by and large liberal. I mean, we have voted liberal.
Politically, yes.
Politically, we have voted liberal or Democratic forever. In fact, we have a Democratic governor. But I know what you're saying. Sitting here watching it unfold firsthand, because it was on our nightly news, our local nightly news every night about how the case was progressing. I wasn't necessarily shocked, but I was at the same time, because if you watch that video in its entirety, in my opinion, and if you read the protocol set forth by that department and the Department of Justice, he should have had him put his hands on the dash.
Yeah.
And not fire on him almost immediately.
Yeah, he pulled his gun so quickly. My God. I mean, I know time is of the essence and everything, but he looked shaky. The cop, the dash cam video that they released recently, that cop looked shaky as heck, and he pulled his gun immediately.
He did.
How could that be protocol? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, exactly. And he did, and that cop was, that police officer was Geronimo Yanez. I do believe that's how you pronounce that one. And he was acquitted again of killing Fernando Castile in that infamous traffic stop. But now, watching the video, and I know we all saw it, we discussed it on this very, very show when it first broke, that he did not, now, according to all accounts, follow the procedure set forth again by the Department of Justice and his own police department. Wow, now, do you guys believe, now this is the murmur going around, this is not coming from me, I just want to stress that, the cops are killing people with impunity and getting away with it. Do you guys believe that? Do you think that there's some of that going on?
I think that's always been going on. Absolutely. I think, as we've said many, many, many times, this is a really, really difficult situation overall. If we're assuming goodwill, we're not talking about dirty cops or cops who are, out to actually eliminate someone or anything like that, but just normal, everyday police, citizen situations, confrontations. Everyone acknowledges it's extremely difficult, it's extremely fraught, and you kind of never know what the right move is until after the fact.
Well, yeah, according to transcripts, Yanez, that's the proper pronunciation of Geronimo's last name, I'm sorry, yelled, "Don't pull it out," as in reference to Castile's
So
gun, which Castile, by all accounts, he was actually reaching for his carry permit because he was lawfully carrying a firearm.
Right. And you're supposed to inform officers of that. Like, I was trained out here for my conceal and carry that you are supposed to inform the officers. Because, they don't want to find that as a surprise.
But
so
very true.
As far as I could tell, he was doing things right. Although we were told to keep our hands on the dashboard, though. I was told, inform the officer with your hands on the dashboard. Not moving.
And, yeah.
So you don't want to be reaching for anything when you're telling someone that. So there is that.
He did not, according to what I saw in the video, did not tell him, Fernando, to put his hands in the dash. That was never said. He didn't tell him
to do that. He should have.
He should have said, stop right there, put your hands on the dash, is what he should have done. That's what I would have expected a police officer to do, to stop and not right away start just shooting. How he got away with it, how he got acquitted, rather, with live video the way it was, it's a little shocking to even me. I thought for sure he was going to get, something, manslaughter or something out of the deal, but he got nothing. Completely acquitted.
Yeah.
It's a little bit shocking, and it just seems that we're coming to a tipping point now between, and it's been brewing, but the more people are watching this go on, more people are watching police do what they do. And again, by and large, 99.99999% of the men and women in uniform are good people that are only looking out for our best interests and are truly here to serve our communities. But it seems to me that watching over the years now, this go on with the police shootings, I think that in some ways the police have forgot who allows them to wear that badge. Mm-hmm. And that's us. They work for us.
Well, again, what I was trying to convey is, although it's a very difficult, fraught situation, I think, quite honestly, always in the history of law enforcement, you have had what might be perceived as a somewhat arrogant personality tending to be drawn into that field.
True.
And perhaps more confrontational than is necessary. And I think you've also had, again, because it's such a dangerous, it's such a difficult, it's such an emotionally challenging job. There's no question about any of that. And I admire all good cops more than I can say, because it's really hard. It's very, very difficult. For a while, I was DJing parties for a fairly large group of Los Angeles police officers. And it was the first time I'd really, really honestly interacted with certainly anything like a larger group of police as people.
Generally, it's only Dunkin' Donuts you see that many.
Exactly. And so, I learned, wow, these are real people and they have real concerns and they have real lives and it's very difficult, but they have prejudices and they have tendencies. And I think you'll see that kind of across. It's an organizational kind of thing. I think organizations do have personalities. So to answer your question, I think this kind of thing where people get shot when perhaps they should not have been shot, that has been going on forever. The bottom line is now you're just hearing about it, and because you're seeing it much more. There's so many more outlets, obviously everything to do with smartphones and the internet, and it's so much more graphic when you see it or even just hear it, even if it's just an audio recording. When the public is hearing it now or seeing it, it makes a huge difference in terms of perception. And I think you see that across the board in lots of areas. Are there really that many more autistic kids these days? Or is there just much more awareness of it? And are we looking for it? And have we become more aware that the spectrum is very broad and very wide? So we're seeing kids who might not have been recognized as having a form of autism,
who are not, to be quite honest with you. The lay public has expanded, and MDs have expanded that quote unquote spectrum to everything.
Yeah, everything.
That is not autism.
You have a hangnail, you're autistic.
Yeah, like a little bit socially awkward. He's on the spectrum.
Exactly.
No, he's not. He's just a little different.
No, I hear you.
Okay.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overdiagnosing of autism is unbelievable in this country. It drives me insane.
It has exploded really by leaps and bounds, the misdiagnosis of autism.
Well, and you're handicapping your child with a label that they don't need.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry.
Exactly. But
no, that's fine, because you know what that points out? I just grabbed for something from the air, right? What did I pick? Autism.
Yeah.
So obviously it's front and center. And
sure
foremost.
it is.
So
it
proves your point, I think, Clarissa, that it is out there, and it's really, really prominent, and you see it and you hear it everywhere. So I think that really actually proves your point. So the bottom line is, like so many other things going on in the world today, I don't think necessarily there are more of these incidents. In fact, it's possible there are fewer, simply because there is so much attention on it. And I think cops are starting to get really paranoid these days about it. And I hope we don't see incidents where they are the ones shot, killed, or injured because they didn't respond when they should have. So again, that's why it's such a difficult situation.
Yeah, it really
but I think
is.
it's a matter of awareness and perception and publicity. I think those are the key differences that we're seeing right now. And hopefully that'll all be in the long term, in the medium to long term, it will be for the good.
Yeah, I agree. But that's what was happening in today's big story. I mean, it was kind of older now, but they added more to it during the day of why the jury chose to exonerate him. And that was basically because they were erring on the side of caution. I'm assuming because they cited not having enough evidence to make a rational and compelling decision.
Yeah, and if it's a criminal conviction, the threshold has to be met.
I thought for sure that video would have spoke volumes, but hey, I wasn't on that jury. Anyhow, guys, let's move on. I'd like you guys to meet somebody. Yeah, he's a back alley testicle remover named James Pennington.
What?
Yeah, James is not your smartest tool in the cupboard. I mean, cupboard up there. The drawer. When you open it up, you don't grab James to cut an onion. Let's just say if he was a knife, you wouldn't grab him. Earlier this month, Pennington removed the testicles of a transgender woman in a Denver apartment at her behest, mind you. Pennington is not a licensed doctor in Colorado at all, nor does he possess any kind of medical training. Pennington had instructed the transgender woman's spouse to call 911 if the procedure went poorly. Well, it did. And then when the spouse did call 911, the Denver Police Department showed up. Pennington was taken into custody for practicing medicine without a license, and he's currently being charged with a second-degree assault charge on top of it. Wow. Talk about a bad botched job right there. He can't even remove a ball. Come on.
Well, I mean, don't do people favors when they ask you to remove their testicles.
Well, that's true, but the
that's
victim,
the rule.
But the victim does say she does not consider herself a victim. In a letter to the judge, hoping to help him with his charges, get them reduced or dropped all the way. She wrote, "It was my idea to turn the back alley into an operating room." I'm a victim of society, she says, and healthcare system.
Was it literally a back alley?
It was literally a back alley. Well, it was an apartment building. I'm a victim, she says, goes on to say, of society and healthcare system that is focusing on trying to demoralize transgender people and not help us. I couldn't find a doctor to perform the procedure, but when I offered Pennington $500, he said he would do it.
There's a reason that you can't just get people to do the surgery. Let me explain. When somebody is transgendered or thinks that they're transgendered or wants to be transgendered or change their gender, I'm not going to go through all the politically correct ways to say it. There is a psychological screening process that you have to go through. And you do have to live as the opposite gender for a time.
I would imagine you do. I do not know much about that part of What's going
there's
on?
a process, and it's a good process, okay, people? It's a good process.
You
if you
have
want to
to
skip the process and go, I just want to be a girl. Yeah, we're not.
Well, yeah,
gonna do
but
it.
having your having your man parts cut off still does not make you a female.
No, but it is a big step. It's considered a big step toward becoming the ultimate goal. But I have known a lot of people that want to skip over all the psych processes. They just want to. This is how I feel. I want to get right to it.
Yeah,
there's a reason for it. Trust me.
I would imagine that is not uncommon, where they want to just forego all the formalities and go right to being whatever they want to be, man or woman.
Yes, and I
But
understand
would I
that.
pay $500 for a guy I don't even know to cut my manhood off? Oh, hell no.
It's
wouldn't
absurd.
you go to somebody that did it like on a farm or something for a living? It
Yeah,
might
well,
be a good
yeah,
idea.
at least he could have used rubber bands. 6 to 8 weeks, just fall off on their own.
Just something.
Society's stake in this, and the reason the guy was charged, even with the mitigating circumstances of the quote-unquote victim, who actually was a victim, speaking in his defense, is we don't want people going around doing stupid crap like that.
Yeah. Well,
We
that
don't
is
want
true. And
unlicensed people performing surgery.
one
And
more.
add on to that, as Clarissa's saying, there's a whole process involved, and actually, we have seen it. There was a girl in right here in our nice suburban Cleveland high school, a friend of my daughter's, same grade, and she decided at some point that this was to be her fate, and it was very lengthy process, and she started quite young. She started kind of mid-teens, I think, and I think you're not allowed to. What are the rules prior to 18, Clarissa?
You can. You now they will start like hormone treatment, but when it comes to a full like gender reassignment surgery, that is typically saved until after 18, and there are protocols involved, and that's for a very good reason, because there used to not be these. Just so people know the history, there used to not be these protocols, the psych protocols.
Yeah.
They would just do the surgery. The problem is if it wasn't thought out well enough, a lot of people ended up having some significant regrets.
Well, look at Bruce Jenner. I'm not aware of his manhood hitting the butcher floor yet.
Right.
There is obviously a process to it, no matter who you are. And I, of course, put that very vulgarly, but I'm reading what they're also saying on Facebook, about hitting the cutting room floor. But we will not go there anymore. We will kind of veer away from cutting off testicles. And, evidently you would think that this guy that works at this funeral home driving a hearse would really have a lot of business. You would think so. Living in Arizona, of course, one of the prime places to retire. A lot of people go there to retire. Not this guy. This driver was caught with 68 pounds of pot. Yep, in the hearse. In the coffin. On Saturday. He was taking it up to Colorado. When he was caught smuggling the 68 pounds of the devil's lettuce up, get this, U.S. Highway 28, and he is a foreign citizen. He's a Nigerian that got caught. Christian Lee Zungia, 28, a U.S. citizen again from Nigeria, was living in Arizona, decided, hey, wait a minute, instead of driving around dead bodies, I can make a lot of money in the side by smuggling some pot. Who was ever going to think a hearse with Arizona plates will look, misplaced in Colorado? Well, evidently the police did think that was a little strange. So they did pull him over. When questioned on what was in the cargo and why he would be taking a corpse all the way to Colorado, he broke under the pressure and admitted, no, there is no dead body in this car. 68 pounds of the marijuana. Yep.
He didn't break. It smelled like weed. Come on.
Yeah.
There's no way it didn't smell the high of it.
Yeah, no kidding. I was in
68
college.
pounds.
68
and why
pounds.
is he taking it to Colorado? Wouldn't he be taking it from Colorado?
Well, think maybe now, it doesn't really go into the whole buying and selling thing, but maybe the reason behind him is he can go sell it easier. You see what I'm saying? There's there's no real laws now in Colorado. There
are rules.
But there are rules. But maybe he was going to send it to a dispensary.
Perhaps so, but typically because it is now legal, I would think it wouldn't make any sense to buy from someone who was selling it illegally, someone who was importing.
Yes.
I did not learn. I have not looked into all of the rules of Colorado. I'm only assuming that they are similar to Oregon, and I just know that because we were there and we thought it was so bizarre to see these literally storefronts.
Excuse me. Yeah. Well, exactly.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Driving around town, oh, look, there's another one.
Yeah.
Even like Eugene, for example, you can get a map of all of the all the shops in the area. And you can take a tour if you'd like. But, we were talking to him just because I'm curious and, always looking to learn about things. So we're asking questions. And, there's very specific rules. A lot of them grow their own because then they know exactly what's in it. And they know what strain and they know, all the details of it. And, in fact, I think a majority actually grow their own. But there are very specific rules in terms of where it can come from and what it is and how it's identified. Sure. And they do want to keep it because we're still in a situation where it's relatively rare. There's only a few states that have that kind of openness.
Yeah.
They don't want to jeopardize it on a federal level. So it just doesn't make sense to me why the guy would be bringing it.
It doesn't make any
Colorado
to me, but then again,
Arizona rather than the other way around.
Maybe that's why he was busted. He wasn't smart enough to understand how the pipeline works.
And he should have had a corpse. Damn it!
He should have done what I would have done. I won't go into what I would have done because it would have been kind of gruesome. But anyhow, there would have been a corpse. Trust me. But there wouldn't have been anything left in the corpse. Okay. God,
hollowed out.
Hollowed out, man.
It's all right.
Yeah, okay.
Like a book.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one thinking about that.
You were not the only one.
Well, one more story here quick before we go to break and we come back. We talk about the Carter case. That's a whole nother can of worms that Dr. Cole and I and everyone and Eric will be speaking about. Cameron Korth, from Make-A-Wish hero to strip and drugs loving bomb maker. Let that sink in. Cameron Korth has gone on quite a journey in his life. In 2012, Utah's branch of the American Red Cross named him a Youth Good Samaritan hero for his efforts on behalf of the children and himself that he was connected to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. But 5 years later, he is now 20 years old and facing federal charges for allegedly making a false bomb threat on a flight to Denver, adding to a criminal history he blamed all on drugs and strippers. He goes on to say, had I not had to snort that line of cocaine off that stripper's ass, I wouldn't be in jail right now. Close quote.
That's always what I like to do right when I get to jail is to admit to other things they have not yet busted me for.
Off a stripper's ass, no less. Yeah, I snorted some. He was actually hoping to raise $200, but actually collected $2,000. In a video, he was panhandling on a Kickstarter page about how he wanted to help other Make-A-Wish kids. Really, he wanted money to build bombs and buy cocaine to sniff off said hooker's ass or stripper's ass. So, just saying. So your money went for strippers and, bombs.
I think he could have been honest about that. I think people still honestly would have given to him, I swear.
I've always wondered why, like Jerry, the telethon, they never found a cure. Take him down to the strip club, give him a lap dance. You're going to see some smiling kids right there.
Shocking. Shocking.
I know. You guys don't agree with me in the whole Jerry's kids lap dance thing. I'm just saying, they might get, one last smile. That's all. But we got to run to break now that I've thoroughly silenced the room. We come back. We're going to go to the Carter case. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. Hey, you're listening to After Hours AM, and if you're listening to us via podcast, make sure you like us, follow us, review us, tell your friends about us, tell grandma about us, and keep listening.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852, or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
It's your ideas, work, and creativity that make it your yard. At ACE, we're here to help with hoses and sprinklers to nurture growth, gardening tools for the shape of good things to come, even the right fertilizer and bug killers to make the grass a little greener. You'll find it all now at ACE, your place, with everything you need for your yard, plus helpful advice, almost like we're right there. ACE,
the helpful place.
You're listening to After Hours AM. Do you have a question for the guests or even the host? That's really easy. Go ahead and email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Are you feeling like picking up the phone and being part of the show? Call us at 612-326-6874, 612-326-6874. Come be part of the madness.
You're just sitting there, all high and mighty in your diaper. If anything, you need me. You're a baby.
Come on, Mouse.
Don't you dare take Miles. You can take the children, but you leave me my monkey.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
better known as the Three Amigos of True Crime. Now, when we were talking about our funny areas, or mostly funny areas, there is actually a fairly serious case in the horizon here that I noticed you covered on thecriminalcode.com. So everyone go on over there if you want to read her write-up on this case. This is the Carter verdict. Will you kind of walk us through this case and its eventual outcome?
So there was a girl named Michelle Carter, and she was 17, and she was dating a kid online named Conrad Roy, who was 18. So that 17 and 18 respectively. This was back in 2014, and they both kind of had their own respective problems, both kind of depressive. But Roy in particular was very depressed. He admitted to her that he was depressed, and that he had tried to commit suicide before. And, she's his girlfriend. She's listening to him. And at one point, he comes up with a plan to commit suicide by taking his truck out, filling it with carbon monoxide. And during this entire time, Roy is texting and talking to Carter, his girlfriend, and she is encouraging him to go through with it.
So
One of the texts she sent was, I thought you wanted to do this. This is the right time and you're ready. Just do it, babe.
This is the right time and you're ready. Just do it, babe. That is...
Why did she do that?
Yeah, what kind of person would do that?
Well, and after, as if it wasn't bad enough, after this happened, she actually texted a friend that he got out of his truck at one point because he was scared, and she told him to get back in.
So she was egging this young man's death on, is what she was doing.
Why? What is she? What's her explanation? Why would she do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would she? What could she possibly gain from such a thing, or what did she think he was gaining? What was her motivation?
I would love to know what her motivation was. I posted on this on thecriminalcode.com because the ACLU got involved. So basically what happened was she got charged and convicted of involuntary manslaughter.
Sure.
All right. And she could face up to 20 years in prison. But the ACLU got involved and said, it's freedom of speech. And so I posted some of this stuff on Facebook, and a firestorm erupted. Like, people are very strongly on one side or the other with this case. So what side are you on?
Well,
what do you think?
I think that she was an accessory to a suicide. Okay. And personally, I mean, if you are someone of some influence in someone's life, obviously it's his girlfriend, so she is, and telling him, yeah, do it. Come on, babe. Go. It's time. Kill yourself. You can do this. Egging him on, almost cheering him on to end his own life. That should be an accessory to murder. And the murder being him because he did kill himself. I would be more like after the accessory, to murder.
Yeah, after the fact. I mean, what do you think, Eric? Where do you come down?
Well, I think
that?
she's got to be guilty of something. I'm not sure exactly what the appropriate charge is, and I don't know. Maybe it's not even appropriately criminal. But I mean, my God, she's certainly guilty of morally, absolutely.
Yeah, but
she's
if I
culpable.
tell you, Eric,
I don't get it. I mean, I don't understand why would she do such a thing.
Eric. But here's the thing. Now, if you called me up, hypothetically, let's just say you called me up and you said, "Oh, Joel, man, I'm just gonna end it all. I'm done. I'm so depressed. It's over for me. I'm gonna kill myself." And if I were not to, and my natural response, just so you know, if that call ever did come, I'd say, "Hey, man, let's get you some help. Let's slow down for a minute. Not going, hey, hell yeah, Eric. Yeah, do it, man. Do it." And then when you want to back out, now this is where I have the problem. Biggest problem. He wanted to back out.
Yeah.
She wouldn't allow it.
Yep.
So that is railroading this kid to his own death.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I agree absolutely with that. At that juncture, it is more than just kibitzing. It's more than just, whatever. Yeah, that's a good idea. And again, I can't even imagine how or why a person would think like that or what she thought. I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand. Did she think she was somehow, some way acting in his best interest, or was she just sick and twisted? I mean, did any of this come out in the trial?
I don't, well, this is where the firestorm comes in. A lot of people are very staunchly defending her because she was only 17, right? And a 17-year-old's brain does not work the same as someone that's older. But they're saying, hey, well, she had anorexia at one point. She had her own problems.
So?
She shouldn't be sent to prison. She should be sent to a mental institution. And I need to say this very loudly and clearly on the air. Just because somebody is mentally ill, it does not preclude them from also being criminal or psychopathic.
True.
Those two can and do go together. So when everybody's standing up for her saying, well, she had her own problems, I'm like, yeah, and one of those might be psychopathy, because the only thing I can think of is for somebody to do that is to have zero empathy whatsoever. I can think of no other reason.
Okay, now, why now? Why would the ACLU, and I'm going to tell you why I think first before you answer, come in and say it's free speech when you cannot stand up in a crowded movie theater and scream fire, for instance.
Right.
That is not covered under free speech. This should not be covered under free speech. That would mean that anything you tell the police should not be held against you because it's free speech.
I can say whatever I want.
You know what I mean? So it makes no sense. What do you guys think? I mean, that free speech thing's a crock of crap. Don't agree with it.
Yeah. Well, hey, if free speech also applied to defamation, child pornography, hate speech, perjury, threats, blackmail.
Yeah.
Oh, look, none of those are free. Huh.
Not a one of them are free. And telling somebody, there's been times in my life where someone says, repeatedly, I'm going to kill myself. And, don't leave a mess, man. Trying to, just shock them to the point to where, okay, you telling me this doesn't affect me anymore.
Right.
Why, instead of telling me this, and then I follow up with, or we can get you the help that you need.
Right.
And try, she did not, if she loved him the way that she evidently claims she did, she would not want to see the boy dead.
No, I mean, the judge really hung his case on the fact that just kind of what you were saying, Joel and Eric, is that was what the case hung on. It wasn't just that she was saying these things. It's that the boy physically got out of the truck to save his own life.
Exactly.
And she said, get back in.
Oh, well, okay.
And that was what the whole case hung on, was those 3 words.
Yeah, it is not free speech. What do you think, Eric? I don't think it is.
No, I don't. I agree. It's not absolute. It's never been absolute. Free speech, they're very specific. That's why we have the Bill of Rights and, very specific circumstances under which speech is protected. Mm-hmm. And by implication, there are circumstances under which it is not protected. And very clearly, you have the classic, the fire in the theater and all of the other things that come up when we're talking about things that you cannot say. And no, I completely disagree that it is allowed, that it is not criminal behavior, that if your speech, and it wasn't even speech, actually, it was her actions that led him to kill himself. And if he was trying to back out of it, if his better angels were trying to intervene, she got in their way. And absolutely, that is not okay. If your speech directly, and if it can be anticipated, I think that's a key element. If it could be anticipated that your speech would lead directly to someone's death, no, that's not protected.
And think about the enormous influence your love interest, especially at that age, wields.
Oh, yeah. That's so true.
I mean,
they're everything.
Mind-blowing, yeah. And so he's going to listen, and now tell me she's doing time as we speak.
Well, they haven't sentenced her yet, and she was found guilty. But a lot of people that seem to be in the know are saying that they think the verdict will get overturned.
How would that verdict be overturned? I don't see any way that could be overturned. Simply because he stopped and tried to stop. He stopped, got a truck, and tried to stop from killing himself.
I wouldn't think it would be, but they were saying that it was, that they don't agree with the involuntary manslaughter, that it's freedom of speech, the ACLU is involved. So I think there's a high probability it could get overturned.
She should have got murder 1.
That's kind of how I feel.
It was premeditated. She should be facing, wondering if she's going to live.
You know what somebody on my Facebook page said? Charles Manson never pulled the trigger either.
Right.
Well, that is true. He did not.
And he's in prison for life because of his words.
Now, can they not cite? Can they not cite Charles Manson's case as precedent that words can be used as acts of crime?
That is that's a good question. I almost feel like they could. By the way, I need to give a shout out to Tina, my Facebook friend that pointed that out to me. But I was like, man, that is a good point. Because he's a prime example of where someone's words and influence at that age, too, because a lot of his followers were, younger, that influencing how powerful that is, that they murdered multiple people for him, and he's spending life in prison. So, I don't really see the difference either.
I would think that they would use that as precedent to present in the case that indeed your words, even though you were not, quote unquote, the trigger man, can be used as evidence against you because you directed the act.
Yeah.
As she clearly did. She clearly directed his suicide.
I would distinguish between Charles Manson and this case. That doesn't mean I think this case is okay, as I've already said, or that it is not criminal, and it's certainly morally culpable. But I do think there's a difference between egging someone on who already has an idea and who we're not talking about a third party. We're talking about two parties. So it wasn't as though she encouraged him to go kill someone else. Mm-hmm. Apparently, he had the idea. She encouraged it. Again, no idea why. It seems appalling and unbelievable and even psychopathic. So I don't think it's murder one, but it could certainly be voluntary manslaughter.
Eric, but here's the thing: he wanted to stop. This is where this is where I think my mind goes to for the possibility of murder one could have been on the table. Is he tried to stop, and she kept it going. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. I do. I understand it. I get the distinction, and that's for me where it definitely became. If you recall, when I was first talking about it, I said, well, certainly she's at least morally culpable. But
exactly.
But when she crossed that line from just talking to actually directly influencing his behavior when he was trying to stop, I agree. That's when it became criminal. I just don't think it's the same exact level as first-degree murder.
Well,
I do think there's a distinction.
You are probably right, and maybe I'm way overstepping, but it just kind of enrages me that this would go on. Of course, any normal, rational human being would be enraged at this. A little angry here about her involvement in this young man's suicide. Now, that being said, Clarissa, can I yell at somebody that's on a bridge to jump and not face any charges? Come on, jump! You hurry up there! Come on!
If no one hears you, probably, yes.
But okay, so...
If someone heard you, though? I don't know.
Yeah, Bob, come on, jump! You hurry up there.
And actually, no, you couldn't. And I cite another precedent for this. Like if a bar fight is about to happen, and you're in the bar, right? And these guys are gearing up, and they got broken beer bottles, and they're facing each other down. And then you say, "Get him!" You can be charged, and often those people are charged to inciting a riot, inciting violence.
That would make sense. That would make sense. Wow, what a case! I will keep following this as it unfolds. And, of course, I will be following it at thecriminalcode.com. That's Clarissa's very, very own website that you can look at other cases, too. Everything that we cover here on the show, all the profiles of the infamous serial killers, and maybe sometimes not so infamous, are all right there for your pleasure to read. I know a lot of true crime aficionados love the Criminal Code. So go ahead, check that out. Make sure you stop in and give some love to Clarissa. So let's move on to the next news story that you have blessed us with, because there's a lot of them, and we only have 10 minutes left. So, wow, which one do you want to go at?
Yeah, which one would you like to get to? We've got the super famous one, the not so famous one.
Well, the Bill Cosby thing. No, we should bring it up because it has been again on social media just a firestorm. Some are.
Where do you fall on this one? This is a weird one.
He's got a mistrial going on here.
Yeah,
mistrial. It was declared a mistrial. He was not found innocent. He was not found guilty. It was a mistrial. It was a high-profile case. I think I want to say just with the evidence presented and the sheer volume of testimony, I still sit here and say I think I know in my heart that he is guilty. You don't have that many people show up.
Who's a new guy?
With a similar story, and let me get rid of this audio here that they bless us with on these websites.
Call him the Whisperer.
But you don't have that many people.
Telling you?
Let me
maintenance records and performance
show up. I guess it won't let me read the Cosby case. But you don't have that many people show up and have very similar stories that don't even know each other.
For years, too.
For years. So I'm with Eric, though, in some respects, and not that he's innocent, but I have a soft spot in my heart for him. Because, man, I used to dig his records, his TV shows, his movies. I mean, who didn't love The Cosby Show? You know, if you didn't love The Cosby Show, you know, that was about as un-American as it gets right there if you didn't love him. And so it's such a blow to a lot of us that were fans of Bill Cosby to think that he would do this. And we all hope he didn't, but the writing is on the wall. Eric, man, where do you stand on this?
I haven't looked enough into the details of the actual evidence in this case. And I think that, of course, is obviously where the rubber meets the road. As far as a general statement, oh, yeah. I mean, I think he's guilty. It's just way too widespread. Yeah. You're talking 50 women, and this goes back to the mid-'60s that these allegations, go back to. So, I mean, there's almost no, 99.9% certainty that this is a pattern and this is a behavior that he has engaged in many, 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 many times, and seemingly until now, finally, with impunity. Regarding this specific case, and that's all you can do. You can only try one case at a time, and you can't lump all the other stuff in there. It's just, is he guilty in this instance? I don't know enough about this individual case to be able to say definitively. Did you follow it very closely, Clarissa?
I did follow it, and one thing that was kind of convincing to me, just this is kind of in the article, is that so the reason that the prosecutors went forward with it is, because she came forward, right? But the reason that the prosecutors decided to go forward with it is that in July of 2015, the judge actually unsealed Cosby's own deposition that he gave in 2006 because she filed a civil lawsuit against him at that time.
That's right. That is
so
right.
She filed a civil lawsuit. They opened up his own words, his own deposition. And from Cosby's own words, the prosecutors went, yeah, this is a problem, and charged him.
Yeah.
So do I think that there was enough beyond reasonable doubt? Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't have it wouldn't have made it past the grand jury.
Oh, exactly. So we will all be watching closely if they do recharge or bring charges again to court, of course, because they're got to get a new jury and everything else. So it will be probably some time before we see Bill back in court. But one more here I'm looking at. It just caught my eye, and it's in the list of things that you sent. Again, thank you so much for all the great headlines you provide to us, Dr. Cole. Man mistakenly texts former boss in search of a hitman. What the hell is going on here?
Because you always text when you want a hitman.
Always. I always text for my hitman.
With details.
No details. Always. Always.
Yet another reason that backs up my reluctance to text in general.
Because you're worried you're going to get hold of a hitman?
If I need a hitman and I'm a regular texter, maybe I would be inclined to do so. I don't know.
Text a hitman.
I don't need that temptation.
Yeah, well, I don't know where to begin on. Dr. Cole, go ahead. Clarissa, knock this one out of the park.
So, okay, Washington man looking to hire a hitman that apparently he'd already been in contact with, right? Because he's texting.
Of course.
He looking for somebody to kill his wife and his preschool daughter. Horrible.
Oh my Lord.
He sends a text message to the wrong person. So this is the text message. Hey, Shane, because all hitmen are named Shane, I guess.
Yes.
Hey, Shane,
LOL.
how's it going? You remember you said you'd help me kill my wife?
LOL.
I'm going to take you up on that offer. Life
LOL.
insurance is worth $1 million, and if you want a bonus, you can kill my daughter.
You can kill my daughter too.
Oh
my Lord! Hey, by the way, if you kill the wife and my kid, we'll get 1.5 mil together, and we'll split it. We'll go down to Mexico and live our remaining days. My name will be Paco, and yours will be Gringo, and we will go.
Why does it sound so cheerful?
I don't know. I like that. If you'd like a bonus, just saying, you don't have to do this, but if you're into a bonus, my 4-year-old's got a $500,000 on her head.
Yeah,
what
you
kind
can
of person?
kill my daughter.
Go ahead. Go go ahead. I don't care.
I mean, if you were on the fence, go ahead.
That's like saying to someone, yeah, there's beer in the
know.
fridge. Go ahead. You want a beer? Take a beer. Yeah, it's in the fridge. That's how it sounds. Oh, yeah, by the way, you feel like it? You feel like a little extra coin? Feel free. Kill my daughter. You know, I'm just saying, you know, the bonus would be
Either way is cool,
Exactly.
but if you feel like it.
LOL.
Yeah, I know. It's like it's so lackadaisical. Like, whatever. Like,
why
I have no
not?
feelings about it either way.
Yeah, you
Whatever.
know, it is what it is. You offer.
While you're at it.
Yeah.
Since if you're in a murdering mode, you might as well take care of the daughter.
And
too.
when you're
In the
done,
zone.
will you please water my ficus?
And don't touch my cat. That's important.
Don't touch my cat. Mr. Mittens doesn't like to be touched by strangers.
No, we make light of this, but it's terrible. He texted this to
horrifying.
his boss.
Horrifying.
Now his boss intercepts the texts. So I'm assuming now you would think that being the hitman never got back to him, he would or at least the realization that, oh crap, I sent that to the wrong number, you know, would come over him, and he'd be texting, you got the joke, yeah. You think
Yeah, like, I'm just kidding, bro. Like,
yeah,
that was a joke. Like, how do you recover? You can't recover from that, can you?
No, you
then
can't.
you just move to Mexico with $0.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So
what happened?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, his boss gets the text, and I'm sure he was just like, "Oh, look, it's my employee." What? He gets the text, and he calls the police, and the police go to his house and pick him up. And of course, the man's like, "Oh, it was a joke."
yeah, of course he would. Oh, just kidding. Oh, but seriously, guys, water the ficus, okay?
He was charged with 2 counts of criminal solicitation for first-degree murder and jailed for $1 million bail, which is ironic because that's how much was on his wife's head.
Well, yeah, while you're at it, kill the daughter, water the plant, and don't touch Mr. Mittens. That's in a nutshell right there. Wow, that's insanity. We got a little bit more time. We got to do this one. The teacher.
Oh, a teacher. What is wrong with people?
I don't know what's wrong with people.
I read this one and I'm like, what is wrong? I'm like talking at my computer. A Broward County elementary school teacher found out that her husband, who is a detective, was cheating on her. She found this out by going through his work email, apparently.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and in his work email, so she finds out he's cheating, right?
Uh-oh.
And she's already in the work email.
Sure.
So it's like, what else is in here? She finds a list of kingpin drug dealers and the fact that there is an informant on the payroll of the cops that is with these drug dealers. So in revenge, she decides to kill these drug dealers and tell them about the informant as revenge on her husband.
Wow. So she I don't even know where to go. So she finds out that the husband is doing a hanky-panky in the side. She gets in his email, tells the drug dealers who the informant is, so they'll kill her husband.
I think that was probably her goal.
Yeah,
but
I would assume that'd be the end game.
Yeah, no, but the informant ended up dead.
Well, yeah, so now she's charged of murder for the informant's death.
I don't know that she's charged with murder. I don't think
so.
that's what happened.
Something should happen to her. That is nuts. I mean, by the way, I met the guy that texted me out of the blue yesterday, too. Son about ficus and his daughter. I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but,
You know what? We should actually do that. We should do a mashup of these stories. How fun would that be?
Every week we go through this, and every week they are just dumber and dumber. And we got to run to Fox News. And when we come back, we're talking crime of the century, the Lindbergh baby. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Right after this. We promise we won't text you either. Don't worry about that. But we'll be right back right after this.
We're any actual votes changed? I'm Chris Foster, Fox News. Another hearing on Capitol Hill about whether Russia interfered in last year's presidential election, featuring President Obama's Homeland Security Secretary. Fox's Jared Halpern's live at the Capitol.
The former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson has been pressed particularly by House Intelligence Committee Democrats on why intelligence officials waited until October to publicly acknowledge Russia's role in election-related cyber attacks.
We have to carefully consider whether declassifying the information compromises sources and methods. Second, there was an ongoing election, and many would criticize us for perhaps taking sides.
Johnson says there's no evidence votes were altered by cyber attacks, but is warning about potential vulnerabilities in the election infrastructure. Chris.
Jared, Republicans are now 5-0 in special congressional elections since President Trump took office, with Karen Handel winning the seat in Georgia, vacated by Tom Price, becoming health secretary. Ralph Norman wins the seat in South Carolina that had been held by White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney. A police officer has been stabbed at the airport in Flint, Michigan. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
Chris, the Bishop Airport in Flint was cleared this morning after an officer was critically injured in an apparent stabbing on the second floor of the main terminal. No word on details, though witnesses say the officer was bleeding from his neck. A suspect also seen taken into custody. Fox News is being told that there's no word right now on terror, though the FBI is taking lead on the investigation, that all passengers are safe. We're also told that because of the incident, that there's now upped security around Flint's City Hall. Chris.
Jeff, thanks. Tropical storm Cindy is expected to make landfall near the Texas-Louisiana border sometime tonight. This woman in Lafayette says she's ready.
We don't get too worried about things ahead of time. We just know to prepare.
Fox News. Fair and balanced. The president's son-in-law is doing some diplomacy in the Middle East. Back at the White House, Fox's John Decker.
Jared Kushner's day-long visit to Israel and the West Bank is aimed at restarting peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Kushner first met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. He'll then meet later with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank city of Ramallah. Kushner also paid a condolence visit to the family of a young female Israeli police officer killed by Palestinian attackers over the weekend, an attack which was not condemned by President Abbas. Chris?
John, thanks. The head of Uber has stepped aside.
Just last week, Uber CEO Travis Kalanick announced he would be taking a leave of absence. But now the ride-hailing giant will be looking for someone else to take the wheel after the board asked Kalanick to step down. Kalanick's resignation on Tuesday came under pressure after lots of drama involving Uber's top investors who felt time off wasn't enough. After putting millions of dollars into the company and seeing its valuation swell to nearly $70 billion, these shareholders said Kalanick had to go. In a statement given to the New York Times, Kalanick said in part, quote, "I have accepted the investors' request to step aside so that Uber can go back to building rather than be distracted with another fight."
That's Fox's Tracy Carrasco. A royal family shake-up in Saudi Arabia.
King Salman of Saudi Arabia appointed his 31-year-old son Mohammed bin Salman as crown prince. He's now the first in line to the throne. The appointment strips Prince Mohammed bin Nayef from his title as crown prince and his position as Saudi Arabia's interior minister overseeing security. Mohammed's appointment as crown prince gives him absolute power. He has ruled out dialogue with Iran and moved to isolate Qatar for its alleged support of Iran and terrorist groups.
Fox's Jessica Gallagher. A $40,000 violin left at a train station in Boston has been found. Its owner says she left it there Saturday night. Police say a woman with it on surveillance video has been helpful. Chris Foster, Fox News Radio.
Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And tonight, guys, we have a heck of a show on tap, man. Who do we have tonight, Eric?
We have Greg Ahlgren, whose book absolutely was and is classic, groundbreaking, crime of the century, The Lindbergh Kidnapping Hoax, first published 1993, and did it create a firestorm? In 1927, Lindbergh was the first to fly solo across the Atlantic in his Spirit of St. Louis. By 1932, he was perhaps the most famous man alive. after it was announced that the 20-month-old son of Charles and Anne Lindbergh had been abducted on March 1st, 1932, the entire world grieved for their loss. 72 days later, the boy's body was found in the woods next to a roadway a short distance from Lindbergh's house near Hopewell, New Jersey. Deferred to as a great American hero, Lindbergh was allowed to be the chief architect of the investigation into his son's kidnapping. He demanded that the body be cremated without an autopsy. The book traces the 2.5-year investigation by the New Jersey State Police headed by Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf, which led to the arrest, trial, conviction, and execution of Bruno Hauptmann. It challenges the effectiveness of the investigation and the evidence advanced by the prosecution, which convicted Hauptmann. It also details the role that Mr. Lindbergh himself played in the investigation. More importantly, it dissects evidence previously overlooked of Lindbergh's own role in his son's disappearance, which, in combinations with the author's expert analysis, leads to a new and bold assertion as to actually who committed the crime of the century. Greg Ahlgren is a best-selling author. He's also a criminal defense lawyer in Manchester, New Hampshire. He has been a criminal justice professor, a state legislator, a political activist, and has appeared as a frequent guest on both national and regional television and radio shows on true crime and historical issues. His books include the Civil War novel Fort Fisher, The Battle for the Gibraltar of the South, alternate history time travel novel Prologue, the international thriller The Medici Legacy, and together with Stephen, is it Monier or Monier?
Monier.
Monier, he co-authored, of course, the true crime book Crime of the Century, The Lindbergh Kidnapping Hoax. Welcome to the program, Greg Ahlgren.
Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Hey, Greg, thanks a ton for coming on. And as you know, that there's more and more coming out as we go throughout the years about the Lindbergh case, the Lindbergh baby kidnapping and subsequent murder. Now, what kind of got you, what got your radar going that maybe there's more than meets the eye with this case?
Well, I think with any analysis, you have to start out by saying, was there a crime? I mean, a lot of people report incidents to the police. I think we've seen more and more examples. The typical example that we see that gets a lot of press is the guy says his wife disappeared, she took off, doesn't know where she is, and, 4 months later he's under indictment. So when I started looking at the Lindbergh case, I kind of stumbled across an old article that was written in the 1940s that talked about the craziness of the case, and it pointed to a lot of different factors that never really added up for this writer named by Alan Hind, who had written this article for a magazine in 1947. And I just happened to come across it, 40 years after the fact. And as I'm looking at these factors, I'm looking at them with an eye that has a little, we have a lot more experience as criminal justice practitioners in the 1980s and 90s that we didn't have, let's say, mid-century. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these factors that he seemed as sort of crazy or extraneous factors that didn't really fit into any pattern, I saw as consistent with somebody who's an abuser. And something that we didn't talk about probably in the middle of the last century. And so it just piqued my curiosity, and I ended up taking the article and sending it to actually an adversary of mine, Stephen Monier. He was at the time he was a police chief. He's retired now. But he and I had crossed swords over the years, but I had always found him to be an incisive and engaging person. And I sent him a copy and said, what do you think of this? And I didn't know if he'd respond or not. And a couple of weeks later, he wrote back to me, and we started talking about the article. And then we started doing research, not with the idea of writing a book, but just because we were curious about the topic. And that's just kind of spilled into what became Crime of the Century.
Well, I guess we really need to just back up a little bit and have you tell us what kind of individual, because you did mention an abuser, and growing up, hearing about Charles Lindbergh and the Spirit of St. Louis and crossing the Atlantic and doing all those things, you don't see an asterisk next to his name with abuser on it. That is never brought up in the history books. Oh, yeah, but by the way, he beat his wife. Or, by the way, he beat his children. Mm-hmm. That is not put into the history books. Now, give us a better view, Greg, of who Charles Lindbergh was, the man.
Well, he was very much a loner, extreme loner. Everything he did was alone. He did by himself. Even when he flew across the ocean, he took kind of the radical position that he wanted to do it by himself, whereas other teams had been trying to make the first transatlantic flight from New York to Paris. And he had this kind of crazy theory that he could do it with a single-engine plane by himself. But that was really a reflection of his personality. He was very, very much a loner. You know, I think our perception of him has really been tainted by the Jimmy Stewart movie. We all want to put him in that plane, as Jimmy Stewart and put him across the ocean as a hero and the negative aspects. I mean, back then I don't think the press talked about the negative aspects of some of our celebrities, but like they do today. I mean, today every cable news outlet in the world will be all over this guy.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, he was a hero. And he was somebody that the public adored. We forget a lot of things. Before World War II, if you talk to some of the older generation, I mean, when I say even older than I am, I'm in my mid-60s, but writing this book, you talk to people who remember him before World War II, he was a very divisive figure. He became very prominent in the American First movement, a lot of pro-Nazi activities here in the United States, attended pro-Nazi and America First rallies. So he had that aspect to him, and we forget that America was very divided before World War II, and after the war, it's like the America First movement didn't exist, and we just kind of went on from there. But if you look back, I mean, before World War II, this country was really split on whether we should get involved in another European war. Mm-hmm. So he was prominent in that movement too. That again kind of gets glossed over.
But he did eventually serve in World War II.
Yes,
as a fighter pilot. Or was he a bomber
pilot?
Well,
as a transport pilot.
Gotcha.
He actually he claims to have shot down a plane while
I was going to say
plane while,
it wasn't real clear because then he goes on to be a transport pilot. Then he talks about shooting down planes, and I'm glad you cleared that up. That he was a transport pilot mainly, but then the claim that he shot down planes just didn't fit in my mind. Well, why would a transporter be shooting people down? But anyhow, that's him as a person being divisive. He was, if I'm not mistaken, if my history is not correct, he at one time was looked into very heavily as being, by the government, as being possibly a sympathetic, at least, to the Nazi movement. As you
no
alluded
question.
To.
I mean, he went to Germany.
I was going to say he went there, didn't he, to look into what they were doing?
He did. And he accepted a medal from Goering, which even after the war he would not give back.
That's
Goering,
crazy.
of course, was the head of the German Air Force, and had given him some kind of honorary medal, and he kept the medal, was very proud of it. It had the swastika on it, the whole bit, but it would never return it or say anything bad about it.
Wow, that just shocks me.
Hey guys, I think before we go too far into it, really quickly, I mean, I don't know that they're out there, but there might be a subset of people that actually don't know what happened in the Lindbergh case.
Yeah, we're going to be getting to that. Exactly, we got to get to that, but kind of want to paint who he was before we kind of dived into that, so we have a better understanding of why we think that maybe he was involved. Now, jumping ahead, let's talk about that case. Clarissa, you bring up a great point. That's really the biggest part of his history. I mean, we all knew of the other stuff, but the Lindbergh kidnapping has always overshadowed Charles himself in a lot of ways. That must have been huge news on that day, in 1935, or he was found in 1935, but when his son was found to be missing.
Yes.
In 31, I do believe.
He went from total obscurity, this kind of loner individual, and once he flies across the ocean in May of 27, he comes back and his life is forever changed. He's a national hero.
Yeah.
Does all kinds of tours.
Kissing babies.
Eventually meets Anne Morrow, the daughter of Dwight Morrow, who was a partner of J.P. Morgan, and they get married. And he did some survey. She was a writer in her own right. And they did some survey flights. They flew to the Orient. She wrote a very beautiful book called North of the Orient, describing their flight to the Orient. And then their first child was born in June of 1930. And shortly after the child was born, he that's when he went to the Orient. He took Anne, left the child with his in-laws, and took off for several months. Ended up in China in the fall of 31. Where they received word that Anne's father had died suddenly. So they returned to the United States, and he began construction of a house in Hopewell, New Jersey. He purchased 500 acres, very remote. New Jersey was a lot different then than it is now. And these 500 acres in the Sutherland Mountain District near straddling Hopewell, the township of Hopewell. It was a very, very remote area, and he had started building this huge French manor home, stone French manor home with about a half-mile driveway on a deserted dirt road. So in the winter of 31-32, they weren't living in the house, actually. They were living with her parents nearby, about an hour away. And they would just go out there on weekends. The house was still under construction. And they would go out there on Friday evenings, and they would stay the weekend with just a butler and a cook, Oliver and Elsie Waitley. And there was a governess, but the governess had weekends off. She only took care of the child during the week.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would come back on Sundays. So they were scheduled to come back February 28th, Sunday, February 28th, 1932. Lindbergh, they actually would come back Monday morning. So Lindbergh goes into New York on business on Monday, and Anne is packing up to go back to her mother's house when she gets a call from Charles Lindbergh, who says, "I've changed my mind. I want you to stay over another night." The baby had a cold, and I think the baby is too sick to travel.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, all right, she will do that. And then on Tuesday, he never comes home that night. He drives a shorter distance and stays with his in-laws and goes back to New York Tuesday morning. On Tuesday, he calls again and reaches Anne and says, I want you to stay over one more night to Wednesday before you go back to your parents' house. And so she calls Betty Gall, the nursemaid, and has Betty come out to help her with the child. And Lindbergh had a speaking engagement that evening. This is the fateful day, Tuesday, March 1, 1932. Had a speaking engagement. He was the featured speaker at an NYU fundraising event in New York. But he never shows up at the event. Instead, he shows up at the house at about 8:25 p.m. at night. He later claims that he got mixed up on the dates, and that's why he never showed up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, the mother, before he arrives, the mother and the nursemaid had put the child to bed at about 7 o'clock. The house was the nursery was located on the second floor of this house that was under construction. It had two windows that faced east that bracketed a fireplace. One of the windows had a shutter. The shutters would be closed at night and latched, and then the windows closed behind them. One of these windows had a set of shutters that would not latch because they were warped.
Mm-hmm.
Charles had told Anne to get them fixed. She had not. He said, make sure you get these things fixed, talk to the workmen, whatever. She had mentioned it several times. She had failed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
At about 8:25, he shows up at night. He honks the horn of his car, comes in, does not go up to the nursery. He has dinner with Anne at about 9 o'clock. At about 9:10 or 9:15, he turns to her and says, did you hear that noise? She didn't hear anything. Nobody else heard anything in the house. He said it sounded like breaking wood or orange crates falling off a shelf or something like that. And then about 10 o'clock, the nursemaid goes up into the room to take the baby to the potty for one last trip for the night and does not turn on the light. And she's warming her hands over the electric heater, and she kind of senses that there's something amiss with the crib, and she goes over, and the crib is empty. So she calls downstairs. Lindbergh comes running up the stairs. His wife comes in from the adjoining bedroom. They flip on the light. The crib is empty. Lindbergh says, Anne, they have stolen our baby. Those are his first words. He doesn't search the house, doesn't look around to see if the baby crawled under the crib, doesn't look, He comes right in, takes one look at the crib, and
that's
says,
suspect right there. Yeah, that's very suspect right there because, well, number one, if I would have heard wood breaking, I would have been up and investigating my home to see where that came from. But number two, I wouldn't walk in, look in the crib. They've taken our baby without looking.
Like what?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that even mean?
Yeah. Right. What does that mean? Without looking around, because I have a son that's darn near that age. He's a little over that age, and he is a rascal, let me tell you. And it's not uncommon for these little tykes to crawl out of their crib when they get to be that age and kind of make their way wherever. And usually he likes to be under the crib. So for him not to look at all, the grounds, nothing, just boom, assuming, they took our baby. That is highly suspect. That would be the first thing to glare at me. Just like it probably glared at you right away, like a big neon sign being an investigator the way you are, a big neon sign. So go ahead. Sorry,
It is.
Professor.
And it's also interesting because he used the plural, they.
Yeah.
Rather than our baby has been stolen or someone has taken our baby or I think there's been a kidnapping. Why does he use plural? Why would you immediately think of a gang?
Yeah. Exactly.
Which kind of is interesting because eventually when a ransom note is found, it says, we have your baby. Mm-hmm. So that just seems kind of odd that he used plural and then they used plural. He immediately leaves the room. That's all he says. And they have stolen our baby. He runs out. He gets a rifle. He loads the rifle, and he runs out of the house. Nobody knows where he goes. Anne and the nursemaid, Betty Gow, is sitting there looking at each other, and then they do what you and I, everybody else would do, and what you mentioned, you start looking around the room. They don't find the child. They go downstairs, and they sit there twiddling their thumbs, kind of disconsolate. Mm-hmm. Lindbergh comes in a few minutes later from wherever he went, and says to the butler, Mr. Whately, call the local police, tell them our child's been kidnapped, and then he runs back out again and gets into his car and takes off. He asks Whately something about, do you have any flashlights? Whately doesn't. Has Whately go into town to try to find some. Mm-hmm. Again, he disappears. When he comes back the second time, he comes into the house, but this time the local police have arrived. He has a conversation with them. He goes upstairs by himself. He goes into his study for a while, and then he goes upstairs back into the nursery. When he emerges this time, he says he found a ransom note. But no one is to touch the ransom note until the fingerprint men arrive. So he brings the local police up. They look at the ransom note. It's propped on the windowsill. It's propped on the window where the shutters would not latch. That one on the east wall on the right of the fireplace. So he then calls the state police, and the state police eventually arrive, and they take over the investigation. Eventually, the note is slid open later that night after the fingerprint man arrives. He finds no fingerprints on the envelope, no fingerprints inside on the pages. And inside is a handwritten note that says basically, we have your baby, $50,000, we'll give you further instructions in 2 to 4 days. Typical type note like that.
Yeah, the no-nonsense ransom note. We have them and pay us, otherwise bad things will happen. Now, did the investigators find any physical evidence inside the home? Fingerprints or anything?
Yeah, that's also interesting. They dusted the whole room for fingerprints. Now, even assuming that a kidnapper had come through that window, I mean, this begs the question how the kidnapper would have known the one window in the house that didn't latch. But even assuming that the kidnapper came in that window by luck, probably, and was wearing gloves, you'd still expect everybody else's fingerprints to be all over that nursery.
You would think
the mother,
so.
The father, etc. The whole room was wiped. There were no fingerprints at all on any of the hard surfaces, the dresser, the crib, the headboard, the windowsill. I mean, usually you wouldn't expect, back then they didn't have the technology to find fingerprints on porous or soft surfaces, but certainly any hard or smooth surface should have yielded fingerprints. There were none. One of the investigators says, boy, it seems like somebody wiped this whole room before we got here, which is, again, is kind of odd. Why would, I mean, if the kidnapper forgot to wear gloves and then while he's halfway through the act, he says, geez, I forgot to wear gloves, I better wipe down the whole room.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just bizarre.
Yeah, they're going to want to get in and get out. They're not going to want to hang around and wipe things down and maybe tidy up things. They want to get out. Generally speaking, if you're committing a crime, you'd want, time is of the essence. You don't want to get found.
So they look around. They don't find anything outside of that very window on the ground is a ladder. It's like a homemade ladder made in 3 sections that could be put together. The bottom section had a cracked side rail and step. And the theory was, at that point they went on with an investigation. Lindbergh put out an ad in the news, not an ad, but an announcement in the newspaper. He wanted to negotiate with kidnappers, all sorts of ransom demands poured in. Eventually, 3 separate ransoms were paid, none by his own money. He never put his own money up for any of these.
That's kind of interesting. Who did that then? Who put the money out there, Greg?
His in-laws.
Okay.
And 3 separate ransoms were paid. 2 people were charged with extortion and convicted, and he negotiated with this shadowy figure in a New York cemetery through an intermediary who involved himself in the case. And eventually, the ransoms were paid. No baby was ever produced, and on May 12th of that year, a truck driver stopping his truck about 3 miles south of the home to relieve himself in the woods, walked into the woods and found the remains of the child. So Lindbergh was notified the baby had been found. He goes to the morgue. He says, yes, that's my child, and orders it to be cremated immediately before there's any forensic testing or toxicological testing at all on the child.
That is strange. I mean, obviously, unless he's a part of some religion that forbids that, which are very few that do forbid that kind of. Normally, autopsy would be the first thing they'd do. I would think, to find out how he died and maybe more clues to who did it.
Right. There was a cursory medical examination before the cremation, and the local doctor said there was a small hole indentation in the skull. The body had been ravaged, probably by animals, so it's unknown how revealing an autopsy would have been anyways. But the theory was that the child had a cracked skull, and the theory was that when the kidnapper was coming down the ladder, he or she dropped the child. The child died instantly. Because of the state of decomposition, they thought the child had been dead about 8 or 9 weeks, which would have fit with the March 1st disappearance. Yeah. And that the ladder cracked, he dropped the baby died. In a panic, he drove south from Hopewell and deposited the child in the woods. So that was the working theory. And then about 2.5 years later, one of the ransoms, Bruno Hauptmann, was caught passing notes from one of the 3 ransoms that were paid. He was arrested and eventually convicted of not only the kidnapping but the murder.
So they had their man as far as someone to charge at that point.
Right. That was the fall of 1934 when he was finally caught. I mean, for 2 years the case languished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And back then, now of course, that was the news of the day. I mean, it wasn't just a story; it was the story.
It absolutely was. I mean, the police investigation, I mean, everybody who had New Jersey plates driving all over the country was routinely stopped and roasted by the cops. I mean, and anybody, young couples who had the little 20-month-old sandy-haired toddlers were, be picked up by the police and brought in and, made to prove that was their kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what kind of frenzy there was across this country.
Wow.
I mean, he was America's hero at the time.
Man, I couldn't imagine that, though. I think that maybe, we're underwhelmed at the moment because it's been, a lot of us, because it's such an old case and, it's been made into a mockery. Oh, the Lindbergh baby, jokingly right. Sometimes, jokes and everything else. But back then, this was a serious, at-the-top level news. It trumped everything.
Well, and if it could happen to Charles Lindbergh, that his baby could be kidnapped, think of how much panic that would create in just regular people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can't even think of what celebrity today might be on the equivalence of Lindbergh. I mean,
that'd be like Angelina Jolie's kids going missing. I mean, my Lord.
I don't even think people would care that much about her kids.
Probably,
I hate to say
not. More likely not. But yeah, I know what you mean, though. What star would rise to that fame of a Charles Lindbergh, especially back in those days? We're talking about major fame. He was what everybody wanted to be.
You're talking about a much narrower media world. So whoever the media trumpeted, I mean, they were huge superstars. Today, the media is so diffuse and so spread out, it would be hard to come up with someone really, really that famous and that perceived to be that heroic. So, I mean, it really was a combination of factors that led to people just being devastated by this. It was how can life be so unfair?
Yeah, well, exactly. Now we got to run a break. We come back, we're going to kind of dig into some theories Greg has and Clarissa has and I have and Eric, you have about maybe Charles' involvement in his own child's disappearance. That, maybe he was a little more in the know than everyone thought. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Something to do with your time, something to do with your peace of mind, something to do alone, nothing to do, so won't you pick up the phone? You turn me on, you tune me in, keep it up till dawn, here we go again. You turn it up straight to your head, and you know that I live, and you're better off dead. Radio red, I'm radio.
Hey, you listen to After Hours AM, and if you're listening to us via podcast, make sure you like us, follow us, review us, tell your friends about us, tell grandma about us, and keep listening.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If pop culture is to be believed, roughly 40% of all people are actually vampires, or dating one. Well, undead or not, you can always save on a clean, comfortable room at Motel 6, even if you sleep during the day because direct sunlight turns you into a pile of sparkly coffee grounds. Speaking of which, we have free coffee every morning. You day sleepers may want to go for the decaf. I'm Tom Bodette, and we'll leave the light on for you. Book online at motel6.com.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852, or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
This is Jen McGowan, founder of Wayward Souls Promotions, a company dedicated to helping individuals, teams, radio shows, and others that are seeking exposure for their individual events, conventions, and shows. We offer a wide variety of advertising, such as web-based article, social media posts, podcast advertisement, and so on. Contact us at paranormalpromotion@gmail.com, visit us on Facebook at Wayward Souls Promotions, and visit our website at www.waywardsoulspromotions.com.
You're listening to After Hours AM. Do you have a question for the guests or even the host? That's really easy. Go ahead and email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Are you feeling like picking up the phone and being part of the show? Call us at 612-326-6874, 612-326-6874. Come be part of the madness. Welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olsen and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
Wow, you left us hanging there, Dr. Cole. Why would you do that? Why would you scare us that way? And of course, we are talking tonight with the great and talented author, Greg Ahlgren, tonight. And, we are talking about the Lindbergh case and really digging deep into who Charles Lindbergh was, and more importantly, for this thing, why some believe he was involved in it. Now, when we were off air, Greg brought up a great point that Charles Lindbergh was not above playing cruel practical jokes involving his child. So, can you tell us about that, Greg?
Well, one of the things, when we started looking at this case, we started looking at Lindbergh. Not just the facts of the baby's disappearance, but the different personalities in the house. And one thing that his biographers have talked about was that he had this, what they talked about in a glowing sense, he had this fine, sense of practical jokes, or sense of humor, and that he would play these practical jokes on people. But you look at these practical jokes, there was nothing joking about them. When he was an airmail pilot, he roomed with another pilot by the name of Bud Gurney, who used to go out and get drunk at night, come back with, they were young single guys, and this is the 1920s, and he would go out, what we'd call partying today, I guess. And Lindbergh didn't like that. He didn't approve of alcohol at all. So when Gurney would come back into the room at night, he would have a pitcher of ice water on his bed table, and he would, having been doing some heavy drinking, he would chug this jug of ice water, as people often do who get thirsty, who have been drinking.
Sure.
So Lindbergh emptied the ice water one night and filled it with kerosene. And so Gurney comes back at night, grabs the pitcher and chugs it, and ends up in the hospital with severe intestinal burns.
Wow.
Now, I can't tell you how many biographies of Lindbergh that I've read that have talked about his, as that as a practical joke. There's no practical joke about doing. You could kill a guy doing that.
Yeah, very easily.
There was a guy who didn't like, who came, a family associate came and wanted to change clothes for dinner, and so they put him in a closet to change clothes. Lindbergh takes a tear gas grenade, pulls the pin, throws it in the closet, and closes the door. That could have killed somebody.
That's not funny.
Tear gas, it's not funny. But, these biographer after biographer talk about this fine sense of humor that he had. About 3 weeks before before March 1st, sometime in February, he had taken the child and hidden the child in the house and then said the child's been kidnapped. Now, I can't imagine going to my wife as a practical joke when our child was, 3 years old or something and saying, hey, guess what? Our child's been kidnapped, and just causing just a total uproar and panic and calls to the police and everything else. And then, 30 minutes later when the child's found alive in a closet and fine, and just say, oh, I was just kidding. Isn't that a funny joke?
Yeah.
I mean, my marriage would be over, I would think.
Yeah, I would assume so, yeah. Most of ours would be over. Oh, gotcha. Isn't that hilarious? I hid him from you. Yeah, I don't see, especially a mother with an infant child, will not get any humor out of that.
He had dinner once with Amelia Earhart and her husband, Putnam, and his wife, Anne Lindbergh. And Anne and Amelia started this conversation about women's rights and the role of women in contemporary society. And Anne was wearing a silk dress, and Lindbergh goes in the kitchen, fills a glass with water, comes up behind his wife, and pours water down. I mean, she's having this intelligent conversation with a very accomplished aviatrix and leader of the women's movement, and he pours water down her dress. And Anne just stands up and is totally humiliated and just starts crying and sobbing and just runs from the room. Now, this anecdote was related by Amelia Earhart in one of her books, and she was just saying how dumbfounded she was and how embarrassing the moment was.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at Lindbergh's practical jokes, so to speak, all of them aren't really jokes. They're really efforts to control behavior by somebody else. He didn't like Gurney, drinking. He didn't want his wife talking about women's issues. He didn't want, he was very, angry about something that happened in the household the day he hid the child. And, the fact that I keep coming back to Ian saying, this is all my fault because I had been told several times to make sure that shutter was latched, and I never got around to telling the workmen to get the shutter latched. So this is my fault. It's consistent. If he took the child, he could have been taking the child intending a practical joke, so to speak, but really trying to punish Anne for not having fixed the shutter.
Yeah. Well,
typical abusive husband. I mean, that's a domestic abuser, no question about it. Very, 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 very typical. It's a joke. It's always a joke, but it ends up hurting people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you're exactly right, Clarissa. That seems to be, and Greg, it seems to be the MO of what I have been told and what I have actually witnessed with people treating their spouses, significant others poorly like that. And that's abuse. That's just a common, normal, run-of-the-mill tactic they seem to use, a lot of people that are looking to impose their will on others, as humiliation and scare tactics a lot of different things. Now, Clarissa, you know, as all of our audience knows, you are a very, very accomplished forensic psychologist. What would your workup be on Lindbergh? If he were sitting in front of you and you had to speak with him, what would your analysis be of him?
Well, I'm guessing he's certainly a domestic abuser, and that has its own sort of diagnostic profile. He's definitely narcissistic. There's no question in my mind about that. I don't know if he would actually meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder or not, but I wouldn't be surprised. And he definitely has some very prevalent antisocial, or another word for criminal, tendencies in him. I mean, he had enough in him that he could obey the law for the most part, but when it came to morals and his own personal relationships, he didn't respect the rights of others. So that's pretty clear. I can tell you that I probably would I think some people did find him charming. I think he had that about him. Occasionally he could work that up, but I think I'd probably see through that. And I don't know that we would like each other very much, but at the end of the day.
Well, it doesn't sound like he liked a lot of people if you read deeper into him.
Now, by domestic abuser, please define that for everyone and make sure we know what you're talking about here.
Okay, somebody who is a domestic abuser who shows spousal violence is usually somebody who does have a high degree of narcissism, and they do want to exercise a very high degree of control. So it's somebody that is always trying to control everything in their environment, including their spouse and their children, or domestic help. That extends to everybody in the house. Their children are usually seen just as an extension of them, not as autonomous beings. And their spouses can be seen that way too. And any sort of, like a spouse paying attention to someone else at a dinner party, just listening to them talk to someone else at a dinner party might be enough for a domestic abuser to jump in some way to make sure the attention is taken back to him. That's kind of how I see Lindbergh with all of his jokes. He always wants the attention on him. It can never be on her. And if she doesn't obey him immediately in the exact way that he wants her to obey, there will be consequences.
And these incidents we're talking about are just incidents that were observed by third parties who happen to write about them.
Yeah.
And these reports all come. Who knows what happened? I mean, that has to be just the tip of the iceberg, what happened behind closed doors.
Sure. Yeah. And then we move forward now. Charles Jr. is gone. And now, what would Lindbergh now, devil's advocate, play the devil's advocate here for a second. What would Charles have to gain by kidnapping his own child? Come on, guys. But really, what would he have to gain, Greg? I mean, and Clarissa.
Well, I start with the analysis that there was no kidnapping, and I'm reasonably confident that there was not a third-party stranger abduction. However, that being, because it just doesn't make sense for a number of reasons. We could go on for an hour just on that issue alone.
Sure.
But it doesn't make any sense that Hauptmann or anybody else would come out to a house to kidnap a child on a day when the people weren't supposed to be there. I mean, they were only there on weekends. Why would you plan a kidnapping for a Tuesday? Unless you're just driving around randomly and you decide I'm going to go up to this house and grab a kid out of the second floor and it just happens to be Lindbergh's. I don't think so. So if you were, the theory is he's watching the house, he's stalking them, he's got them under, surveillance, he's doing all this stuff. Why would he have gone on a Tuesday night? He knows they're only there from Friday to Monday morning. The decision to stay over that Tuesday night was only made that day. How would he know that? How would he know? How would any kidnapper have known where the nursery was? I mean, there's no blueprints of the house online, right?
Excuse me.
There was no online. How would the person know which window was the only window in the whole house that didn't latch?
Yeah, exactly.
He puts the ladder against the one window with the shutter that's closed but can't latch because the shutter is warped and the latch won't catch. If he had planned, if Hauptmann had planned, I mean, Hauptmann was married. He was living in a duplex in the Bronx with his wife. He didn't have he and his wife were living in the Bronx. If he's going to kidnap the kid, what was his plan? He's going to show up at his house with this kid and say, "Oh, here's my cousin from Germany. He's staying with us for a couple of days while I write these notes to, I mean, it's crazy theory. He doesn't, according to the prosecution's theory, he had no other Confederates. This is a lone wolf job. So what was his plan? How was he going to pull this off? Where was he going to stash the kid? Who was going to take care of the kid?
And not only that, but possibly at that time, the most famous child in America.
Right.
Everybody was looking for this kid.
Right.
So,
and he just shows up with an extra kid in the Bronx and says, who just happens to look like the kid whose picture's on the front page of every paper in America.
Yeah, and the radio was probably blaring with the news that the Lindbergh baby's been kidnapped. Everybody, look for this kind of child. Things like that. Exactly.
Amber Alert.
Exactly. The old-time Amber Alert. Mercury Theater breaks in going, the Lindbergh baby's been gone. Orson Welles is going crazy. That's how big of a deal this was.
Now, in the that was the opening argument in the opening statement by the prosecution at the trial, was he was going to kidnap this child, keep it in the Bronx, and then ransom the child. But the child died accidentally, was dropped accidentally, and then Hauptmann reformulated his plan. He hid the body and decided to reformulate his kidnapping and demand for ransom into an extortion plot. Well, it's kind of quick thinking if you're lying on the ground in the mud in a rainstorm with a dead kid next to you. But if so, then why would he drive, if he lives in the Bronx, why would he drive in the opposite direction, south of Hopewell, to stash the body? Why wouldn't he just take the body with him? I mean, your first instinct probably would be to run through the woods and get out of there. Your plan just went kaplooey.
Yeah,
But even if you're that smart, even if you're that shrewd and cold and calculating, you don't just hide the body, throw it on top of the ground 3 miles from the house, and you don't know whether the body's been found, and they're going to set you up when you're trying to get the ransom money, right?
And you would think, though, that somebody like a Charles Lindbergh, your only son, to carry on his name and his legacy, would have extraordinary value to him.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that he would have shown a little more emotion. From all accounts, he was not a very emotional person, even during this time.
But remember, based on kind of the profile that I was giving with the narcissist and the antisocial, his son was just an extension of him, and he can create more.
I didn't think of
And
it
he
that
had
way
more.
because that is not, my mindset would be like, oh my
No,
God,
of course not.
Where's
You're
my
normal.
child? But exactly, yes, he had more children, and to replace Charles Lindbergh Jr. Now, what was was it reported what his true reaction was when the baby was found? Did he release some type of statement?
No, I don't recall a statement, no.
I
don't recall a statement.
You would have thought... Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, super quick show, fascinating topic. I've really learned an awful lot. I'm thinking here, pondering all this. But we're down to only about 12 minutes. So I would love to hear what your theory is of what actually happened, and Clarissa's as well, before we get to the end of the show.
Well, I'll try to be quick. I won't take more than 6 minutes, and I'll give the balance to Clarissa. As I said earlier, I start with the supposition or the analysis that there was no kidnapping. I mean, in the opening statement to the jury, the prosecutor said Hauptmann was going to stash the kid in the Bronx and, negotiate a ransom.
Yeah.
By the end of the case, in his closing argument, he totally changed his theory. He says that the plan all along was to kill the kid because he couldn't stash the kid in the Bronx with his wife, and then hide the body and then, extort the money. The problem with that is you still have the problem why the child was then south of Hopewell, since he had to go south, leave the body, then double back through the town where the police were swarming to get to the Bronx. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, the body was left on top of the ground. If his plan was to kill the kid, he would have buried the kid, made sure that the body would not be discovered, because that's how the plan's going to fall apart. So then the question becomes, there's a lot of that. I didn't think there was a stranger abduction. The question then becomes why, as somebody else asked earlier, why did Lindbergh do it? And my initial, I kind of looked at domestic abuse, whether he got frustrated, hit the kid died, he concocted a story, which we've seen abusive parents do. But he had such little interaction with the child. I didn't see that as realistic because if the child was out of control and he was stressed, he would have just handed the child to the nursemaid. So then, this whole idea of the practical jokes to control behavior, I can see him, in order to punish Anne for not fixing the shutter, thinking, I'm going to take the child, hide the child, and make her think this is what happens when you don't fix the shutter. Now you've learned your lesson. And then the child, the ladder broke. The child was dropped at 8 o'clock or 7:45. The child died. He panics. He hides the body, and he would have had enough time to get there, dispose of the body, come back, and be back for his 8:25 arrival. So that was the most likely scenario. However, since the book has come out, we've been approached by a number of people who have information, claim to have information, and one of them was kind of telling. It was the daughter of one of Lindbergh's mechanics who worked on his plane at Roosevelt Field, who said that her father had always told her this story, that when the child was about that time, that Anne had shown up at the airfield with the child. And when the child and Anne got out of the car, you could tell there was just something wrong with the child. He just didn't seem right. Mm-hmm. And Lindbergh saw, I guess now, he would have called one time, he would have said the child was, retarded or whatever the term at the time would have been. And Lindbergh saw Anne walking across towards him with the child and started screaming at her, went over to her and just yelled and said, I told you never to take that child out. You get out of here. I don't want anyone to see that child. And she just started crying and sobbing, got back in the car with the child and drove off. And when the child disappeared a few months later, the mechanics would say to each other, we should go to the police. We think he did it. Now that paints a different picture. That paints not a negligent act, but an intentional act.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And then having those people be the eyewitness to all this, that brings a whole new spin to it.
So, in other words, the child had some sort of disability? That's what we're saying?
There were always rumors. We could never, there's no medical records we could unearth at this point, but there's been a lot of anecdotal reports that there was something wrong with the Lindbergh baby. Every picture we've looked at, I've never seen a picture of that baby smiling.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And being the perfectionist and narcissist that Lindbergh was, nothing he created could be defective.
Yeah.
I mean, for lack of a better term. And so in his mind, this represented a defective thing, not his child, but something that has gone awry.
It was an affront.
Yeah.
It was an insult.
Jeez. I just...
well, that's even worse.
That is. It just speaks volumes. Now, Clarissa, what are you thinking?
I actually was kind of on the same page as Greg. I had always thought that it was a practical joke gone wrong as well. I didn't know about the ladder or the bump. I actually thought that it might be something like the hamper where the baby smothered to death, which would be very easy if you're hiding a kid somewhere and they can't, get out. So I always thought that it was a practical joke gone wrong that he had to cover up. That's always been my theory. But I mean, if it was more intentional, I suppose. I mean,
but 1-year-old now, Clarissa, in a hamper. 1-year-olds are hell on wheels, man. I got one. And
this is true.
Keeping them down? Oh no, they're walking, they're running, unless again the child was disabled and couldn't run, couldn't talk, couldn't scream. Mm-hmm. That would really lend to why you don't hear about, because I know if someone in my child's room, he'd be screaming to high heaven. You know what I mean? The alarms would be going off. He would be going, oh my God, there's someone in here. But that child didn't. So A, it was someone he knew, like Charles, or B, he was so disabled that he could not verbalize what was going on.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. It's possible. I just can't see that he would. It seems so odd, I guess, that he would intentionally do it, because I think that he could have hidden that for quite a while successfully.
Oh yeah.
Given that the family was so under his thumb,
Yeah. Yeah, he could have controlled the situation, I would imagine, fairly easily.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, he was the man in that family, and he, by all accounts, ruled with iron fist.
One way or another, though, it seems like he panicked. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, he was a big disciple of this Dr. Carroll, who was a leader in the eugenics movement at the time that, purified the races by exterminating the disabled or feeble-minded. And so then that ties into the second theory, or the theory that I've kind of been drawn to since the book was published because of, additional information that we've uncovered. I mean, we've also, in the last few years, it's also come out that Lindbergh had a secret family in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't known until, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago that came out. I mean, a guy that could keep that from his wife could keep, anything from his wife.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
By the way, I have another family in Germany. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and he can
with
go
kids,
with kids and everything. He can go his whole life or his whole marriage up to that point, or whatever point she did eventually find out. But he could go that long without divulging this whole other family. If he could do that, and man, my wife knows me better than I know myself sometimes. I can't get anything over on her. You would have thought she would have sniffed something out. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
The wife. You would have thought somehow some slip-up would have happened, and she would have been all over that. But there again, we're talking about someone that is controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
Controlling
I was going to say,
the
it's not that she
situation.
didn't know, it's that she wasn't allowed to say anything.
Exactly. Any closing thoughts, guys? I mean, we're almost to the bottom here. We're almost done here. Man, anything you guys like to add?
Well, only that when the issue of the German family came out, the Lindbergh family didn't deny it. And it was interesting. It was only a year or two after the biography of Lindbergh by Berg had won the Pulitzer. So, he writes his biography. He doesn't know that the subject of his biography has a second family. Kind of a big point, to have missed.
Yeah, that's kind of a big one.
Half of his life.
Right. And then when that story comes out, the Lindbergh family, the kids and everything, never denied it. So I think that they did know, to your point, that it was a secret within the family, but no one had spoken about it, which again goes back to the control issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Definitely, the more I'm hearing what you're saying, the more I'm kind of glancing at as we're talking, it paints a completely different picture than what we were taught in grade school about Charles Lindbergh. Because none of that was ever brought up to us. Oh, by the way, he liked to beat his wife. He liked to play practical jokes that almost killed people. None of that was ever divulged to us as kids. We were supposed to look up to Charles Lindbergh as a hero. Look, if you set your sights high, you can be like Charles Lindbergh. You can do this. You can do that. That is really what we were taught as kids. And that is quite honestly, in a lot of ways, how it truly is when you pull back the veil. On a lot of these people that are famous, they're all human beings with their own flaws.
Right.
It's the great man theory, and if you're a great man in capital letters, you can get away with almost anything.
God, yes, absolutely, you can. And a lot of times you can. Money talks, and you know what walks. And he had fame, notoriety, and money. So to bring him to justice back then, being America's hero, my gosh, it would have been bigger than what we're dealing with, like the Bill Cosby, for instance. Whole nother case, whole nother situation. But really, he was one of America's sweethearts. Exactly. But Greg, thanks so much for coming on the show. Why don't you tell them where they can get their own copy of Crime of the Century, The Lindbergh Hoax?
Well, any bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, either in the brick-and-mortar Barnes & Noble you can order it, or you can order it online from any of the distributors, Ingram, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. And I think there's an ebook out now, too, by the publisher, so you can download it.
Very cool. Greg Ahlgren, everyone. Check it out. Formulate your own opinion on the Lindbergh. I'd love to hear what you guys think about whether he's guilty or innocent and why. But until then, take care of each other, love each other, and see you guys tomorrow night where we go the paranormal route. Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.